Welcome into the Week 10 game-by-game recap for fantasy football, of course. And what we're doing is going through every single game from yesterday's slate, including Thursday Night Football game where Jamar Chase was just legendary on every account. I believe it was the second highest PPR scoring performance in fantasies over the last 25 years or something, 53 points. And what's funny when all those types of games happen, I always get a bunch of pictures sent to me or DMs on Twitter of people who had those players in their league and still lost their matchup. I would, if I had a player going on Thursday Night Football and they scored me 55 points, I would be cruising for the rest of the weekend. I would be in a great mood, 96 hours of just stress-free fantasy football, and then I lose. There would be bars on the window. There would need to be bars on the window, I should say. All right. We got Monday Night Football, one game left on the slate. We had a few teams on bye this week, so we've got about 13 games to recap. As always, Underdog's got you with an absolutely free square on the app. Okay. So if you are new to the app and you go download Underdog Fantasy, it is one of the first links in the description, and you use code BDGE when you download it, guess what you're going to see on there? You're going to see Matt Stafford needing to throw for one single yard on Monday Night Football against the Miami Dolphins tonight. And as always, if you are new here, please don't send in super chats. I don't really go through the chats as I'm doing this. I'm just kind of locked in on all the games from yesterday, just trying to give you all as much value as humanly possible. I'm a little bit sick, a little bit under the weather, so if my voice sounds a little bit more monotone or robotic than it normally does, that is why. So I'm going to try to remind myself to take a breath every 45 seconds to a minute or so, because sometimes this is a lot of talking here. This shit will put a man right into hell like a fire-breathing dragon, okay? So again, BDGE, when you download Underdog Fantasy, you're going to get a deposit bonus. You're going to get this free square where Stafford literally only needs to throw for one single yard for you to win that square. I'm ready to jump into the games if y'all are ready to do the same. So let's start on Thursday Night Football, where we have the Baltimore Ravens beat the Cincinnati Bengals 35-34. Just an absolutely insane game on both sides offensively. This is just something that we've seen both sides struggle with defensively. They can't really stop fucking anything through the air. Joe Burrow, 428 and 4 touchdowns. Jamar Chase, 11 for 264 and 3 touchdowns. Hopefully, we've got the biggest cone of all time back onto the field. At this point, I don't really care about him coming back onto the field because my team is just destroyed and absolutely nothing that he can do to save it. But T. Higgins should be back. They didn't put him on the IR. He's missed 3 games. Now they have another 10 days until they play their next game. So maybe we see T. Higgins back. If not, it just keeps going to Jamar Chase. And the level of production that Chase Brown is putting up, I just don't really see it stopping anytime soon. And there were some reports that Leonard Fournette was going to work out for the Bengals, and then they signed Gary Brightwell instead. So that should tell you the type of shape, physical condition that Leonard Fournette is in at this time of his personal life. I hope he's doing okay, though, because he's been a legendary player and meme for the last half decade or so. So Chase Brown just continues to be an every week, with the production he's getting the goal line work. He saw 9 catches in this one. I think this is 25 to 30 PPR points in back-to-back weeks. So we're just not getting cute. It doesn't matter who the matchup is. He's just too involved to even think about sitting. Khalil Herbert was traded for, and he saw 1 carry in this game and went into the stomach of that carry, and he fumbled it immediately, was never to be seen from again. So, again, stocks up for Chase Brown. Jamar Chase is a GOAT. The tight end position is still one to really, it's tough to decipher. You thought it was going to be a Gesicki game, and he played okay. Tanner Hudson ended up catching a touchdown, seeing 7 targets. But realistically, everyone kind of just takes a backseat to T. Higgins as a secondary pass-catching option in this offense when he is back on the field. Now, again, I guess the injury report this week will be telling for T. Higgins. We need to see him get back on the fucking practice field Wednesday or Thursday with a limited practice for us to feel okay about him playing next week. On the flip side, Baltimore is now 7-3, 4-1 at home. Lamar Jackson continues to put up one of the single greatest statistical seasons that we have ever seen. I tweeted this out a few days ago, or it might have been yesterday. It might have been this morning. Football is just one giant 6-month period that just meshes into one day for me. That's how fucked my brain is. Lamar is on pace for, I think it was 4,500 passing yards, 41 passing touchdowns, 900 plus rushing yards, and I think he's got 2 rushing touchdowns on the season, so like 3 or 4 rushing touchdowns. And it would be single-handedly one of like the top 10 best statistical seasons of all time for a quarterback. I think you can argue, like, obviously it's a 17-game pace, so it's a little bit less impressive than some guys who threw for like over 5,000 in 16 games. But if you're talking about 4,500 passing yards, 900 rushing yards, that's 5,400 total yards plus like 45 to 50 overall touchdowns. And just the way he's playing right now, he's just seeing the game so fucking slowly, man. Like every time it felt like in previous years when he would get pressure, it almost went into like this manic like sort of panic mode. And right now it feels like he just evades one guy and then he's back to being like dialed in and seeing the field smoothly. And maybe that's a credit to the weapons that they've built around this team now, because Zay is a monster. He obviously had a down game, but we're not worried about him. Tylan Wallace is out here catching 84-yard touchdown passes. Mark Andrews has absolutely hit his stride. Rashad Bateman's played great for them. Deontay Johnson, man, if we're looking at snap counts over here, and I'm on Baltimore, let's go to the wide receiver position. This dude somehow ran fewer routes this week than he did the previous week. So he ran 8% of routes in week 10, 27% in week 9. We thought that would see an uptick there. Didn't happen. So right now, Deontay Johnson, I think you're still holding on to him, but it's very clear that you cannot put him into your lineup. And listen, if he's sub 30% or even like sub 60% for the next like 2 weeks, he's obviously become a drop candidate. So definitely concerning for Deontay, especially since you got those like amazing weeks out of him in Carolina with Dalton. You're like, sick, I got a top 12 wide receiver. I don't know if we've seen the type of swings that we've seen from Deontay Johnson ever in fantasy, where the season started with Bryce Young and like his stock, if he was a portfolio stock, it would be like, it's just like completely down, completely up, completely down again. So not great for him, but I don't think you could really start anybody else in this passing game besides those guys. I will say Keaton Mitchell did make his return. However, I looked at this beforehand. He didn't really play any snaps. Derrick Henry was at his normal 60, obviously took most of the carries and stuff. Justice Hill, still around 35 to 40%, was 38% snap player, ran 42% of the routes. Keaton Mitchell right here, down here, 2%. Obviously, that will start to increase as he gets healthier and healthier, but Justice Hill has played really well. I don't think they're just going to throw him to the wayside. So Keaton Mitchell is someone you could stash, I think, in like 14-team leagues, but he's not someone I really think you need to have on your roster in 10 or 12-team leagues. You probably need an injury to Justice Hill for him to become fantasy relevant. And just should mention this is the Fantasy Life website, which is a phenomenal website with a lot of like in-depth stats here. If you are looking to find out, snap counts, routes, target per route rate, who's getting the short down and distance snaps, who is getting the 2 and 4 minute drill snaps, long down and distance, all that kind of stuff for every position, as well as like a million other things on their website that I very rarely even use that's probably super fucking useful. This is fantasylife.com. They have a membership that's $100 for an entire calendar year. So if you sign up for it now, you'll have it through week 11 of next year. It's $100. If you use code BDGE when you get the membership, you're going to get 20% off that membership. So you're getting it for $80. It is probably the best single investment you can make if you're a fantasy player for the next year. And again, $80. Come on now. Let's get fucking serious here. Let's move past the Thursday night games. We've got the Germany game, Carolina and New York. And I'll say one thing. They got back-to-back wins here now. I would be getting very nervous as a Carolina fan that Bryce Young is playing like just well enough that it might make them reconsider drafting a quarterback really high. Like if they pull off 2 more wins, they're not going to have that high of a draft pick. Right now, this is insane because Carolina, their roster, right? Like obviously they lost to New York and it's easy to make the case New York is worse. I think at full strength, like when Andrew Thomas is playing, Carolina has the worst roster in the NFL. I don't know that it's particularly close with anybody else. Right now, the way that they're set up, they are currently slated to have the 10th pick in the NFL draft. They have the worst roster probably. At worst, the bottom 3 roster, probably the worst. And they have the 10th pick in the NFL draft right now. That is tough. Daniel Jones, the way he's playing, is also tough. I'd like to write it off as not having Andrew Thomas and living under pressure, but you're playing against Carolina. Like, there wasn't that much pressure. He was just missing wide open dudes downfield. He wasn't throwing it. Like, I know everybody can point out that flea flicker play where he had two guys running open downfield, like 30 yards down the field, just didn't throw the ball. I don't know what's happening there. Maybe they sit him for Drew Lock. They have part of his contract situation where if he plays a certain number of games, or no, it's there's a certain date in the offseason that as long as he is healthy, they have to pay him a guaranteed price on his contract. So this becomes that part of the season where he's playing poorly. They have nothing to play for. They might sit Daniel Jones just so he doesn't get hurt, and they don't owe him that guaranteed money. So that could be coming sooner rather than later. Tyrone Tracy continues to be a fucking dog, 18 for 103 and a touchdown. Yeah, I mean, he's, as long as he is healthy, he is an every week, high-end RB2, but more realistically, it's easy to say a high-end RB2, but like there are a lot of dudes that are just, performing like RB1s, but only 12 of them can kind of get in there. But, Carolina, great matchup. He'll struggle against probably worse matchups just because the offense doesn't really move as effectively, but he is explosive. He's a good runner. He's a touchdown scorer. Like, he is everything that you need in a fantasy running back. So love some Tyrone Tracy. Malik Neighbors, I listen to a lot of podcasts throughout the week just to stay on top of what's going on. Malik Neighbors has struggled since Andrew Thomas has gone down because the entire offense has struggled and Daniel Jones has struggled mightily. Like, Malik Neighbors' games have been super fucking underwhelming. Getting a lot of targets, getting a lot of opportunity, but it has not converted into anything for your fantasy team. So, listen, I think as long as Andrew Thomas is out, which he is for the rest of the season, like, this entire offensive line is going to struggle. Daniel Jones is going to struggle. Maybe Drew Lock starts and it like gets a renewed energy for one game and we get excited about it, but I wouldn't bank on a ton of ceiling games for Malik Neighbors here on out. There's not much you could really do at this point because he struggled now for like a month of the season, but if you were sharp enough to kind of think about that beforehand and equate it to the entire offense struggling, then maybe you got out. Wandell, 8 targets, still seeing a really high target per route rate run, but they're just not converting into anything really useful, especially with Darius Slayton out for this game. You would have thought one of them would have a bigger game, but didn't happen. Chuba continues to absolutely be goated in fantasy. Another 28 carries, 153 and a touchdown, 4 catches for 16 yards. Now, Chuba got banged up a little bit, but came back in the game, so nothing serious. Miles Sanders, however, I believe he fractured his ankle. I want to say that was the word that came out. Originally, I think people were concerned about high ankle sprain, and maybe it is just a very severe high ankle sprain, but I want to say that he ended up fracturing his ankle. So I think it's similar to maybe like the Pacheco injury. He's going to be out for the remainder of the season. Jonathan Brooks, they have their bye this upcoming week, so Jonathan Brooks was kind of a surprise inactive. We thought he was finally going to be active here in Germany, but now they give him one more week, and then he'll be back. And listen, there's a lot of moving parts here. Like, this was kind of our sentiment since the summer, was there was just no reason to rush this kid back. I do think Jonathan Brooks owners, if you held him this long, you got kind of lucky because of the Miles Sanders injury. Because now I think he's kind of forced into an RB2 role where that could be 7 to 10 touches a game. And he's a good enough player that he could actually turn that into some effectiveness for your fantasy lineup. But he's clearly, like, Chuba Hubbard is playing out of his fucking mind. They just gave him a 4-year, $32 whatever it was, $1 million extension. He's clearly, like, playing really well, deserved the extension, and got that. So, yeah, Jonathan Brooks, I mean, like, he's probably a nothing burger to your fantasy lineups going forward. But I'm excited to just see him play over the next month of the season, just for future purposes and thinking about him next year. All right, we got probably the woke game on the slate here, Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon. New England Patriots 19, Chicago Bears 3. The Bears are just like the woaded offense right now. Their offensive line is in shambles. Caleb is in shambles. Their scheme is in shambles. Every wide receiver in that group is in shambles. I don't know how you could play any of those dudes as anything more than a super desperate flex play at this point. DeAndre Swift continues to get work, but I'm just worried about this offense as a whole just imploding. The offensive line can't block for anything. So unless, and this was supposed to be like a paper soft matchup, unless they have incredible matchups, which they did for the first like 10 weeks of the season, it's going to be tough for anyone to produce in this offense. So I think just with them continuously playing horrible, there might be some changes, to the offense this week, like new play caller or something, and maybe it sparks a little bit of energy into the offense. But at this point, there are almost no positives you could take away from it. On the flip side, Drake May continues to play relatively well. Probably needs to take care of the ball a little bit better. He's thrown a decent amount of interceptions. I feel like he throws at least one, maybe even two, pretty much every single game. But, they came away with the win. Ramondre, 20 carries. Not much to really write home about as it relates to fantasy here. I guess Kayshon Boutte could be picked up in 14, 12-team leagues. He's seen 6 targets, I want to say, in 3 straight games. So the opportunity's kind of there, but there's nothing else really going on. I would also, if I'm in a 1-quarterback league, I would hold on to Drake May. This was his worst rushing game, but also just a super tough pass defense to play against in Chicago. So better days ahead. Bills and the Colts. Josh Allen had a pretty rough outing, to be honest with you. 280 and 2 interceptions, no passing touchdowns. They get it on the ground, but it's kind of going to happen when one, Amari Cooper's out, Keon Coleman's out. So you have 2 of your top weapons out, and then Dalton Kincaid is probably the other big takeaway here. He kind of fucked up his knee a little bit. Now there's 2 ways that this can go. From what I heard, it's most likely a PCL sprain, which would make him week to week, probably unlikely to play next week, and it could be, a 1, 2, 3 week absence. There's also a chance that it's like the AJ Brown injury, where it sounds more serious than it ends up being, and maybe he could return. What I do think happens here, though, if Kincaid misses time, obviously, moving parts, so we don't know when the other weapons are going to be back, but Khalil Shakir continues to need to be in your lineup. I'm not really banking on the Matt Collins for targets here. I think Dawson Knox becomes a relatively decent tight end pickup here. If Dalton Kincaid misses time, it's not like Knox is anything great, but Knox and Allen clearly have chemistry. He's put up good fantasy games before, and it just gets a whole lot more condensed because there's no other tight ends really doing any damage in this offense. The backfield, again, it's all James Cook. People that were asking me about Ray Davis this week, crazy. He's not playing any snaps basically. Now, Joe Flacco is basically making Anthony Richardson look good at this point. Can we just fucking put Anthony Richardson back in the lineup, please? Please, for God's fucking sake. I guess the only real takeaways here are we don't know what Pittman's status is going to be going forward. I kind of wish they would just put him on the IR so we could see that this weapons group kind of plays itself out going forward. Now, one thing to note here, Josh Downs had another 10 targets. His target per route run rate is fucking insane, and it continues to be insane. It's, he had a good PPR day, I think 7 for 75, so it put you about 15 points, but he's still only running about 70% of the routes, so he's coming off the field in 12 personnel sets, which is 2 wide receivers, 2 tight ends, and a running back. So he's playing just the slot receiver, though. It doesn't feel like it matters at this point because 30% of the targets, again, 36% target per out run rate. Michael Pittman missed this one. Now, it ended up meaning a big boost up in routes for Alec Pierce and my man Adonai Mitchell, one of my favorite rookies coming into this class. He had a good game. 6 for 71 on 6 targets, caught everything thrown his way. The dude just creates separation like a goddamn divorce lawyer, dude. He is so good when he's on the field and running one-on-one routes, and he is very, very difficult to cover, and I want to see him get the opportunity going forward without Michael Pittman there to see what he could do on the outside, because he was doing that early on in the year, and Anthony Richardson was just overthrowing him on fucking everything. This kid probably could have 4 or 5 touchdowns with an extra 250, 300 receiving yards on the season if A. Rich wasn't all over the fucking place. But that being said, Michael Pittman continues to miss time. I think Pierce and Adonai are both valid pickups that you could use in your flex spot if need be. Denver and Kansas City. So on the Denver side of things, Sutton continues to be an absolute fucking monster. The last 3 games of the season, he has basically matched what he did the first 7 games of the season. So right now, Bo Nix is getting continuously better week in and week out. Sutton has been a big part of that, so he's a rock solid wide receiver too. Biggest takeaway here is, without a doubt, the backfield here. If you guys weren't paying attention to this game, Devontae Williams ended the game with 1 carry. Aldrick Esme had 14. This was something that we had spoken about in pretty much every recap over the last 2 weeks and my waiver wire videos. It wasn't something I was you need to pick him up in 10-team, maybe in 12-team if you have some depth, but he was someone that was worth owning, and I'm talking about Aldrick Esme, the rookie, in deeper leagues. And now he's going to be one of the top waiver wire pickups because of the little flip here. Sean Payton come out and said that he was going to get more work. We want to get him more involved, and then they finally did that. They don't always do that when they say that, right? Especially Sean Payton. He's just fucking talking out of his ass half the time. But we saw the massive jump in playing time for Aldrick Esme, and he looked relatively good, man. Javonte had a season low 29% of the snaps. Jaleel all the way down to 11%, and it was a lot of Audric Estimate up to 45%, 64% of the rushing attempts, 21% of the routes. So that's the type of dude that they want in there to bang against the teams like Kansas City who are able to stop the run. So listen, I have no idea how to predict this backfield going forward. But if we're just looking at a what have you done for me lately type of league, 14-1 is a pretty big fucking discrepancy here. So Audric Estimate feels like he needs to be owned. Next week, listen, we could see a game where he gets 9 carries, Javonte gets 7, and Jaleel gets 5. It's really, really hard to predict it. All I'm saying is Estimate obviously needs to be rostered at this point in case he becomes the workhorse going forward. On the flip side, we finally saw a game in which Kansas City probably should have lost, and then they didn't lose because they blocked a field goal at the last second. No real fantasy takeaways here. Kareem Hunt got home through the passing game. Travis Kelce continues to be a beast since Rashee Rice went down and Juju got hurt. And D-Hop, 456, so a little bit disappointing relative to last week, but he got the Patrick Surtain treatment, so better days ahead. Saints and the Falcons, this one was fucking ridiculous. I don't know how we lost this game. Well, I know how we lost this game because Youngway out here fucking missing 3 field goals. What are we doing? I will say, this was a game where if this game plays out 10 times, we win this game 8, maybe 9 times out of 10. We had 500 yards of offense and came away with 17 points. Time of possession, we dominated, but again, it was just the field goals we missed, right? We lost by 3. We missed 3 field goals. Derek Carr also connected on 2 deep balls to Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Olave out, Rashid Shaheed out. Maybe you want to look at Scantling, but he's obviously going to be, he's going to be exactly what he's been his whole career. It looks like he's in another offense where he's going to get opportunity. We have seen this he has played with every great quarterback in the NFL, and now he gets Derek Carr. He was on the Bills this year. He was in Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers. He was in Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes, and never once have we seen consistency out of him, even when he got complete opportunity there. So I'm good on MBS. That is absolute fool's gold. Bijan's been going absolutely GOAT mode, and guess what? If you drafted Bijan right now, don't plan on it stopping anytime soon because their end of the season schedule is gorgeous. Let's see. San Fran, Tampa. Okay, so some good takeaways from here. Brock Purdy, 353, 2 touchdowns. Christian McCaffrey, first game returning. Obviously didn't look as explosive as he's always looked. He didn't have a good game on the ground, 13 for 39, so 3 yards per carry. But he got home 6 for 68 through the air, and that was something that we did not see for the most part throughout the season with the other running backs that the Niners have been kind of trotting out there. So that was huge to get those guys back, or to get him back in that vicinity to keep this offense kind of rolling forward. So C-Mac, I had him as like an RB12, the RB12 to 15 in my rankings this week. And I think with each passing week, we're going to get a little bit more and more comfortable with him, and he'll get his legs back under him. So, he didn't score, but 6 for 68 in the air is really encouraging. Now, biggest takeaway here is that Juwan Jennings, man, if you have him on your team, if he's somehow on the waiver wire, he was playing the Brandon Ayuk role, and I'm not sure that he plays it that much worse than Brandon fucking Ayuk, man. Juwan Jennings is the clear X receiver here, ran 95% of the routes, and I'm going to be honest, man, I don't know if you guys were watching that game or not, but Purdy left a lot of points on the field for Juwan Jennings. Man had a 32% target share. Shanahan came out and said that Juwan is going to play this role going forward for the remainder of the season. 28% target per route run rate. Catchable targets you could see all the way down here at 64%. 34% of the air yards in this one. There were like a good 3 or 4 targets that if they were a little bit better, Juwan easily could have went 10 for 150 in this game. And I know that because I was playing against him in your idiot league mates, and I was like, I felt like I was getting fucking lucky with the amount of times Juwan Jennings was getting targeted and them just not landing. So Juwan Jennings is looking, he's setting up. Obviously, it's a great passing matchup against Tampa Bay. They are pretty much a pass funnel defense at this point. I still feel great about Juwan Jennings going forward. Ricky Pearsall is another really solid game. He had that 46-yard catch and then breakaway for a touchdown early on in the game. Didn't do a whole ton going forward, but still looked good for a rookie. And they're both ownable. They're both dudes that I think Pearsall is probably a flex play. Juwan Jennings I feel super good about having as a wide receiver 3, if not 2. in my lineup. Bucky and Rachaad White both get home. Rachaad through the air as usual, and Bucky on the ground as usual. They've completely just like phased out Sean Tucker. Baker had an awful day. 116 through the air and a touchdown. It was like his first real test on defense, felt like, where he couldn't really utilize the tight end and the running backs. So hopefully they get Mike Evans back, and that's really all I can say about that. Well, we got 49ers and the Bucks twice. How you doing? All right, while you're here, I think we got like, we got like 650 people in the stream and only 32 thumbs up. What's we doing? Show some appreciation to your fucking elders, all right? If you're out there and you're enjoying and you're listening, hit the thumbs up button, please. Lets me know you want me to continue doing these bad boys. Pittsburgh and Washington. This was a game that got so much hype going into the week, and I was nervous that it was gonna let down. Excuse me. But it did the fucking opposite, man. If I'm a fan of either of these teams, I'm just loving what I'm seeing. Pittsburgh, like 28 points here. I believe they're playing next week against the Ravens, and it's like a 48 or 49 point over-under. I couldn't tell you the last time Pittsburgh played in a game where the over-under was that high. It had to have been Big Ben back in like 2019 or some shit like that. Russ goes 195 and 3 touchdowns, throwing a moon ball to Mike Williams for a 32-yard score, doing what he does best. George Pickens finally gets home on an amazing touchdown catch again. I was just waiting. I was waiting for them to replay that and be like, oh, he juggled the ball and it hit the ground and take it away from him. But he secures it, 5 for 91 and a touchdown. Now, I will say, a little bit concerning if you're a Najee Harris owner. He had, a relatively bad day, 21 for 53 on the ground and a touchdown. However, he did suffer an ankle injury, and then he came back. So this can go one of two ways. It could be relatively minor, and maybe it's not that big of a deal. However, most of the content that I've consumed this morning that was based around injuries is skeptical of Najee Harris moving forward. They seem to think, based on video evidence, these Twitter doctors that are real doctors in real life, of course. I just refer to them as Twitter doctors because I only communicate with them via Twitter. They're on Twitter giving their opinions on the videos that happen, and they're usually pretty accurate. They are stating that this is a high ankle sprain of sorts, like a medium-level high ankle sprain. The issue here, obviously a high ankle sprain is devastating to any player, is despite him coming back in the game, we have seen that this year from multiple players. Joe Mixon, the high ankle sprain, came back in the game. Ineffective. Cooper Kupp, high ankle sprain, came back in the game. Ineffective and then left. Jonathan Taylor had the high ankle sprain. Every one of these that's happened so far, and a player came back in the game, and then the team was like, it's not that serious. All of those guys ended up missing somewhere between like 3 and Kupp was up to 5 or 6 weeks. So I would say it's not a definite. Don't take my word on it for sure. But if you're a Najee Harris owner, I would, I would just start to look to make other plans with your running back position. Unfortunately, that also means on the flip side of things, if you were a Jaylen Warren owner, you just got a massive lucky strike to your roster. Jaylen Warren finally came back. This felt like the first game he was really at full strength. 14 for 66 on the ground, 2 for 29 through the air. Cordell Patterson will play a much bigger role, obviously, if Najee Harris is hurt, and Jaylen Warren would never take like a workhorse role here, but Jaylen Warren would probably be the 55 to 45 back, and now that he feels like he's fully back and healthy with a team that's running really smoothly with Russell Wilson, like Jaylen Warren, if Najee misses time, becomes a really solid running back too, sort of like Austin Eckler over here. Jaden Daniels had his worst game of the year, but I don't think he played poorly whatsoever. I think he got unlucky, especially in fantasy. Like if you had him in fantasy, you got a lot of unlucky breaks. And I know that also because that team that I played that had Juwan Jennings also had Jaden Daniels. So every time they got on the goal line and they had the touchdown pass called back and they were on the 1 yard line, they just kept handing it to Eckler instead of letting Jaden run or Jaden pass. So bad day, but not a bad actual day for the quarterback by any means. Pittsburgh D just played great fucking defense in this one. Terry gets home again. Eckler, you continue to, obviously dial him up as long as Brian Robinson is out. B-Rob, I don't know. From what I've heard today, he's missed multiple weeks now, and it felt like maybe there's a little bit of a setback, so I wouldn't say he's a sure thing to return next week either. But you could also see, like, Brian Robinson is so important to this team. You know, most of the time you don't like attribute a running back to being that important to a team, but he does set this sort of mentality where you can ground and pound the game. Like in this one, you look at all the running back numbers here, like Eckler, 13 carries, 3.4 yards on the ground. McNichols, 1.8 yards on the ground, 1.8 yards per carry. Rodriguez, 2 yards per carry. They need someone like Brian Robinson that can just continue to smash into the fucking face of the defense in order to keep the offense kind of, or the defense honest there. So hopefully he can get back. But I think Washington, their offense is a little bit more one-dimensional when he's not on there. Vikings Jags, this was just the woke games. This entire slate of games, like there were a few players that popped the fuck off. Like there was a few teams in every fantasy league that I feel like randomly put up like 160, 170. But the rest of them, there was just abysmal QB play around the league. There were so many games like this. Darnold, 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. Mac Jones, 0 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Baker Mayfield throwing for 100 yards. There were like a good 5, 6, Aaron Rodgers, Joe Flacco, like quarterbacks that were Jared Goff, 5 interceptions. All they were doing was turning the fucking ball over. It was a gross, disgusting week for a lot of quarterbacks. Vikings were obviously super lucky to get away with a win in this game. They win 12-7 despite 3 interceptions from Darnold in what should have been the easiest matchup on their schedule against the Jacksonville secondary. Aaron Jones, 17 for 88 on the ground. Also got involved a little bit in the air. Now, he left for a second with a rib injury. Now, he did come back in and play the remainder of the game. He probably got an injection in there for pain. This is something that he could miss time for. I wouldn't be overly concerned just because he did come back in and play like a significant amount and then didn't leave again. I believe it's similar to like what Jaden Daniels had, where it's going to be really painful and they could probably manage it with another injection next week. And Jaden Daniels was able to play through it successfully. But we've also seen players miss a week or so. But overall, I don't think it's a long-term concern. As I've been saying to you guys for quite a while now, Akers is the clear backup here if Jones were to miss time. However, I do think it would be a committee between Chandler and Akers. And I don't know that I'd feel comfortable with either of them in my lineup. We finally have a TJ Hawkinson kind of breakout game, 9 targets, which tied Justin Jefferson for the team lead, 8 for 72. So that is a welcome sight. If we look at the snap counts, we finally saw an uptick for TJ Hawkinson, and he seems to be nearing the full-time role here, right? 60% his first game back, 71% this week. That's going to just tick up each week probably. And I think, next week maybe it's 80, and then in a couple weeks he'll be up to 100%. And if you extrapolate those kind of target numbers with running more routes, he is going to be a high-end tight end for your fantasy team despite coming off the ACL tear. So for those of y'all that drafted him and held on to him, it was sharp as fuck. Jefferson, first real bad game of the season. Jordan Addison continues to be a fucking cone out there. He's just such a third, fourth weapon in this offense. Like Aaron Jones is playing so well. Jefferson's obviously a beast. TJ Hawkinson now coming back. Jordan Addison feels like he needs to get schemed up plays. And Darnold missed him on a couple big plays. He probably could add another 30 yards in this one. But even that, it's kind of disappointing. And they're not really taking that many shots downfield to him. So Addison's kind of a tough start right now. On the flip side, we had Mac Jones come in for Trevor Lawrence, and from everything we're kind of hearing, the rumors and stuff out of Jacksonville, T-Law's injury is probably pretty serious, and I think he's likely going to miss significant time, if not the remainder of the season. I think he's got a shoulder injury that was similar to Anthony Richardson's, where Richardson decided to have the surgery, missed the remainder of the year here. So that is probably on the table for Trevor Lawrence. Now, the backfield got all fucking weird again. 11 for 44 for Travis Etienne, 2 for 4 for Tank Bigsby. I thought I saw somewhere or heard somewhere that Tank got hurt in this one now. Etienne played 67% of the snaps, 23 for Tank. Dearness Johnson, I'm not sure. So someone can correct me or fact check me on that. I'm sorry. On Monday mornings, I am literally going through every single player and trying to remember every fact and stat and injury that happened. So I might have missed something in this backfield. It felt weird for Etienne to get this much run. But it's just a rotating door here where it's this guy gets hurt, then this guy gets hurt, then this guy's supposed to be the guy, then this guy. It's just a backfield you want to stay away from, especially with Mac Jones. And listen, if Mac Jones is under center, it pretty much makes all of these guys really fucking tough to start. I will say it's against a really tough defense that just blitzes at such a high rate in Minnesota. So there are probably better days ahead for the Jacksonville passing offense. But right now it's BTJ 2 for 12. That's about as bad as it comes. I think you can continue to start Ingram because he's so highly targeted, but the upside is kind of vanished there. Chargers Titans, man, this Chargers team is just so fucking well coached. Biggest takeaway here is, I mean, they only threw 18 passes, 14 completions here, so I wouldn't take much away from the passing game. But Gus Edwards, his first game back, 10 carries to J.K. Dobbins' 15. A little bit worrisome. Kamani Vidal becomes droppable. I still think with Gus Edwards, we're going to end up getting back to the games like we saw in the beginning of the year where Gus Edwards was just very much a cone. And, we'll see next week he'll get 11 carries for 27 yards, and then he'll be like, okay, it's Dobbins. But obviously this can't be a good thing for J.K. Dobbins, just given the fact that he was like a 25 touch per game guy when it was just Kamani Vidal back there. But I still think, unlucky for J.K. Dobbins, they just gave a random goal line carry to Hassan Haskins. I think Dobbins is still like a relatively solid low-end RB2 going forward. On the flip side, Tony Pollard left this game a little bit banged up, ended up coming back in, but it gave way to Tajay Spears to completely split snaps here. And this was Tajay's first like real game back from what's felt like literally a year-long fucking injury for him. First game since week 6, 47% of the snaps, 53% for Tony Pollard. But again, that did include a decent amount of time missed for Tony Pollard throughout the game. I think this is how they want the backfield to be split up. Maybe a little bit more in favor of Tony Pollard. But in the beginning of the year, they probably imagined using both of them as a 1A, 1B. I think Tony Pollard is still a fine running back 2 in your fantasy lineups. But if Tajay Spears is on the field, that's obviously a little bit of a hit to them. Will Levis, plays well, I guess. He made Calvin Ridley play really well, which, again, I know that because that team that had Juwan Jennings and the team that had Jaden Daniels also had Calvin Ridley. So it was not a fun week for me watching these guys just go off and barely miss these huge plays, but then they still make big plays. Doesn't matter. Calvin Ridley, I'm not about to say he's quarterback proof, but he has been fucking fantastic since D-Hop left the field. I don't know if they have him aligning elsewhere, if they have him running the routes that D-Hop was running, or what the case is, but whatever it is, I guess it's Calvin Ridley's got to be in your lineup. Eagles, Cowboys, I'll tell you who doesn't need to be in your lineup. Any fucking player on the fucking Cowboys, man. Cooper Rush, 2 yards per attempt. That has to be an NFL record. For someone that's attempted more than 20 passes to average 2 yards per attempt, there's just no way that's not an NFL record there. Trey Lance came in, looked awful as well. Rico Dowdle was kind of a bright spot here, but he didn't get the goal line carries. They gave it to Zeke on the 3-yard line. He ended up fumbling out of the end zone. And then they were like, we have to make sure that we prove a point here. Let's get Zeke right back on the field. And they gave him another carry inside the 10-yard line. I don't know what they're doing out there in Dallas. It obviously is just a shit show, and it's going to affect every single player going forward here, including CeeDee Lamb, including Jake Ferguson. So that just kind of sucks. If you invested heavily into the Dallas offense, this is kind of one of my concerns. I really liked Dak in the summer. As the draft season got a little bit closer, it started to make me nervous drafting Cowboys players because of how fragile the offense was. They don't have anyone else to lean on if one of these players goes down. If CeeDee Lamb gets hurt, their passing offense becomes super, where does it go to? They don't have a guy that they can go to. If Dak gets hurt, obviously everybody's dead here. So it's it felt very, very fragile, where if one thing goes wrong, it's a house of cards and everything goes wrong really, really quickly, which is what we're seeing right now. So it's not great out there in Dallas. I will say, I've heard a lot of chatter about how this franchise is just in hell right now. I don't really know how to fix the defense outside of signing free agents or just whatever it is. But if Dallas, they need to make 2 moves this offseason to have a great offense again. If you bring in a legit wide receiver 2 outside of CD, if they're the team that signs T. Higgins and then they use a second-round pick, or if they get Ashton Genty, I think that would probably not be a great use of resources because he's probably a first-round pick. But if they get a talented running back in the draft in day 2, if they sign T. Higgins, before you know it, this offense, again, with Dak fully healthy, you talk about CD, Jake Ferguson, a T. Higgins type player, a good rookie running back with explosion, they probably look really good on paper again. I don't know how to fix the defense. They've been playing with a lot of injuries, obviously. Deron Bland has been out most of the year. Micah Parsons missed time. Marcus Lawrence was hurt. They have a lot of injuries, but it doesn't make them that much better. I actually kind of want to see what wide receivers are free agents this year. This is probably not the time or place to do it, but we gonna fucking do it. And this website is SpoTrack for those of y'all that give a fuck. There we go. Free agents by team, free agents by position, all position. We got wide receiver, unrestricted free agent. We got Diggs, T. Higgins, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper, Chris Godwin, thought they re-signed Godwin. Cooks is the guy that they have. Deontay Johnson. Okay, so I think they have like some decent options if they want to get a wide receiver too. Diggs is coming off the ACL. T is probably the most valuable player here. I think Cooper could be interesting. I think there's a good chance he ends up staying in Buffalo because they probably need another wide receiver out there. Godwin's coming off the injury as well. I think they can go in a few directions here, but I would be shocked if they don't end up going in that direction where they try to sign somebody. On the flip side, Jalen Hurts, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns through the air, gets another 2 on the ground. This is why everybody drafted Jalen Hurts so highly in Superflex leagues, to continue to put up these 2, 3, 4 touchdown games, and he is just raking it in. Sometimes it's going to happen with Saquon. Sometimes it's not. He's going to get the touchdowns, but he did not today. A.J. Brown was fully healthy, 5 for 109. The problem with A.J. Brown, man, is he is just so not used in that red zone. He needs to score, it feels like, from 30-plus yards out. And to be honest, I don't really blame the Eagles, man. They have Saquon and Jalen Hurts. Those are 2 of the best red zone weapons in the world. So it's unfortunate they don't dial up like fade balls for A.J. Brown in the red zone area, but it just feels like they haven't needed to rely on their passing game at all this year. And it's tough to get home when this is the type of volume, when you complete 14 passes. Like, it was nice that A.J. Brown got 7 targets. Obviously, it's like way more than anybody else, more than double the next closest player on the team. But yeah, it's kind of hard to get home the ceiling games. Like 5 for 109 is obviously a great game, but at the end of the day, 15, 16 PPR points is not like it's not a week winning type of league or week winning type of week, unfortunately. Dallas Goedert did have his first game action here, scores a touchdown, 2 for 25. Devontae Smith has a bad game, but again, just low volume is going to happen in games where they beat the fuck out of the Cowboys. Speaking of being the fuck out of a team, Cardinals 31, New York Jets 6. Cardinals are now 6-4. Jets are now 3-7. The Aaron Rodgers experiment is going very, 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 very poorly. Garrett Wilson 5 for 41. Devontae Adams 6 for 31. Breece Hall ends up with 80 pretty much useless yards. Not much to take away from the New York side of things, to be honest. This felt like a really good spot for them against a Cardinals defense that I suppose is just a little bit better than we are giving credit for. Budda Baker's playing out of his mind. They probably have a bunch of young players that are – this is what happens with really bad teams coming into the year. We just expect them to be really bad, and we expect that because we don't know most of the players on the team. They don't have superstar players. But when that happens, that also opens up opportunity for a lot of these young guys to prove themselves. So I bet within the next calendar year, we're a lot more familiar with some of the names and the players on the Cardinals roster, because that's what happens. They kind of just break out. On the Cardinals side of things, great game for James Conner, who got it done through the air, 5 for 80. We're seeing Trey Benson be more involved, probably a lot to do with the game script. But again, I still think you need to own him for down the stretch, because he's one of those dudes, like one ankle gets tweaked wrong for James Conner, and Trey Benson is a league winner down there. Lions Texans, this was just disgusting, this game, to be honest with you. Jared Goff throws 5 interceptions. CJ Stroud throws 2 interceptions. Joe Mixon, honestly, this was his this was like an impression of what Joe Mixon was in Cincinnati. 25 for 46 on the ground, 1.8 yards per carry. That is pretty much the Detroit Lions run defense for you, though. They are so good, led by Aleem McNeil. You got to get familiar with that man's name, because he is such a good interior defensive lineman that just clogs up the hole for opposing running backs. We thought Nico Collins was going to play, randomly ruled out again, inactive, so you got to think he'll be back the next time that they step foot on the field, finally. John Mechie has a big game. That ain't going to happen again. Tank Dell disappointing, unfortunately. On the flip side, Gibbs goes over 100 yards from scrimmage, doesn't score. Demont does score 50 yards from scrimmage, so typical game for Laporta. Amon-Ra. Laporta's been a little bit more involved, and I feel okay about starting him going forward. Amon-Ra, I think, scores for the 7th straight game there, so we're not seeing a ton of ceiling games out of him, but listen, if you're in PPR, that's 18 points right there, and that feels like around what he's doing. The yardage has not been there because, realistically, Jared Goff hasn't had to throw the ball. Even in a game where they're trailing most of the game, they still have more running back carries than they do pass attempts, and I feel like they are building up to be just an unstoppable playoff team. Okay, that felt like it was everything. Did I miss any injuries? Did I miss anything here? That felt quick. 45 minutes in, out. Maybe it was because of the bye weeks. Maybe I'm just fucking dialed the fuck in right now. I don't know. You guys tell me, how we feeling out there? Why don't we have more thumbs up on the video? 720 people watching, 134 thumbs up right now. What are we doing? Bobby Slowick is a Nico Merchant. That's fair. I've kind of felt Bobby Slowick has always been a little bit overrated. Just the way that they don't lean on CJ Stroud. I don't blame him now, but I think he just got lucky that all the weapons are hurt. So now it's like his game plan of carrying it on first and second down every play looks a little bit better. All right, y'all. We're going to wrap it up there, as we always do, for the game-by-game recaps every Monday, usually around 12 p.m. Eastern time, but went a little later today. If you want to be part of these live streams going forward, of course, just subscribe to the channel and turn the notification bell on. It lets you know when I do go live. We'll also just be putting out videos throughout the rest of the week. Our waiver wire video tomorrow, our running back and wide receiver previews on Wednesday and Thursday, etc. So subscribe for those. And again, if you are just tapping in now, Underdog has an absolutely free square for y'all tonight. All right, Matt Stafford, he's got to throw for one single passing yard, and you win on their platform. All right, if you deposit on their platform with our code BDGE, that is how you get this free square. Right, it's free money for y'all. It's a free bet. Just get on the platform, go dominate, and I will see y'all tomorrow. Also, again, fantasylife.com to check out that subscription code BDGE everywhere. Every URL you ever go to, use that code. I love you. Smoochies.